Should you stop investing in stocks after age 50? The short answer is probably not. In fact, for many retirees, giving up stocks completely can be riskier than staying invested. Here's why.
Quiet wealth, calm finance, better life.
Something interesting happens after 50. People begin thinking differently about money. In their 20s and 30s, many investors focus on growth. Retirement feels distant, market declines feel temporary, time feels abundant. But somewhere along the way, the conversation changes. 50 arrives, then 55, then 60. And suddenly retirement no longer feels like a distant destination. It feels real, close enough to imagine, close enough to worry about. Many people begin looking at their investment accounts differently.
Every market decline feels more personal. Every headline feels more threatening. Every correction feels like something that could derail years of hard work. And that's completely understandable. Because by this stage of life, money often represents more than numbers. It represents decades of effort, decades of discipline, decades of sacrifice. People aren't simply protecting investments, they're protecting years of their lives. For some, this creates a powerful urge to become more conservative. The logic seems reasonable. If retirement is approaching, shouldn't risk decrease? Shouldn't stocks become less important? Shouldn't safety become the priority? These questions are common, and they're worth exploring carefully. Because while reducing risk can be wise, eliminating growth entirely can create problems of its own.
Retirement planning isn't simply about protecting money. It's also about helping money continue supporting you for decades. And that's where the conversation becomes more nuanced. Because retirement isn't a single day. It's a period of life that may last 20 years, 30 years, sometimes even longer. The challenge is not simply arriving at retirement. The challenge is living through retirement. And that's why the relationship between age and investing is often more complicated than people expect.
Why many people want to leave stocks behind. For many people, the desire to leave stocks behind isn't driven by mathematics. It's driven by emotion, fear, exhaustion, uncertainty. Imagine someone who has invested for 30 years. They've experienced market crashes, recessions, financial crises, bear markets, volatility. They've watched account balances rise and fall repeatedly. By age 50 or 60, many investors simply become tired. They no longer feel excited by market growth. They feel exhausted by market uncertainty. And that emotional fatigue is understandable. After all, investing requires patience, sometimes extraordinary patience. It requires enduring periods when things don't go according to plan. Periods when headlines predict disaster. Periods when fear dominates conversations. After enough years, many people begin craving stability. Not because they hate investing, but because they want peace of mind. They want certainty. They want to stop worrying. Unfortunately, certainty is something investing rarely provides. Even the safest-looking strategies contain risks. They're simply different risks. And this is where many retirement decisions become challenging. People often evaluate investments based on how they feel today, not how those decisions may affect them 10 or 20 years from now. But retirement planning requires both perspectives. Present comfort matters. Future sustainability matters too. And balancing those two goals is rarely easy. Meet Robert. Let's imagine someone named Robert. Robert is 58 years old. He's worked hard throughout his career. He's saved consistently. He's avoided major financial mistakes. And after decades of effort, he has accumulated approximately $800,000 in retirement savings. By most measures, Robert has done well. Yet lately, he's been feeling uneasy. Every time the market declines, he finds himself checking his accounts. Every time financial news appears on television, his attention shifts. The closer retirement gets, the more uncomfortable volatility feels. Recently, Robert began considering a major change. What if he sold all of his stocks? What if he moved everything into cash, or bonds, or other investments that felt safer? The idea seemed appealing. No more worrying about market crashes, no more watching account balances swing up and down, no more anxiety. At least that's what Robert hoped. And he's not alone. Many people approaching retirement have similar thoughts. The desire for certainty becomes incredibly powerful. The problem is that certainty often comes with trade-offs that aren't always obvious at first glance. And that's exactly what Robert is about to discover. The hidden risk of playing too safe. When people think about risk, they often picture losing money, a market crash, a recession, a sudden decline in portfolio value. Those risks are real, but they're not the only risks retirees face. In fact, some of the most important retirement risks are much quieter. The first is inflation. Inflation rarely appears dramatically. It doesn't arrive overnight. Instead, it works gradually, almost invisibly. Year after year, prices rise, expenses increase, purchasing power declines. A retiree who ignores inflation may discover that money buys significantly less 20 years from now than it does today. And that's a serious challenge, especially for someone who may spend decades in retirement. The second hidden risk is longevity. Simply put, people are living longer. That's wonderful news, but it also means retirement portfolios may need to last much longer than previous generations expected. Running out of money at 85 is difficult. Running out of money at 95 can be even more challenging. Which means retirement planning isn't only about surviving the next market correction. It's about maintaining financial strength over very long periods of time. And that's where growth continues to matter. Even after age 50, even after retirement, sometimes especially after retirement. Stocks are not just for growth. Many people think of stocks as aggressive investments designed primarily to create wealth. And while growth is certainly part of the story, it's not the entire story. Stocks can also serve another purpose, helping investors maintain purchasing power. Imagine retiring today and spending the next 30 years relying entirely on assets that never grow. At first, that might feel safe, but over time, inflation gradually erodes purchasing power. Expenses increase, healthcare costs rise, daily living becomes more expensive. Without some form of growth, maintaining the same lifestyle becomes increasingly difficult. This doesn't mean every retiree should be heavily invested in stocks. It simply means stocks often play a role that extends beyond growth alone. They can help portfolios continue working long after retirement begins. And that's an important distinction, because retirement is not the end of investing. It's simply a new phase of investing. The difference between risk and volatility. One of the most important lessons investors learn is that risk and volatility are not always the same thing. Yet many people treat them as though they are identical. Volatility means prices move, sometimes dramatically. Risk is the possibility that a financial goal cannot be achieved. Those ideas overlap, but they are not the same. A portfolio may experience volatility and still succeed. A portfolio may appear stable and still encounter problems later. This distinction matters enormously for retirees
Because many investment decisions are driven by emotion, and emotions often react more strongly to volatility than to long-term risk. Robert hated seeing his account fluctuate. The experience felt uncomfortable, but discomfort alone doesn't necessarily indicate danger. Sometimes volatility is simply the price investors pay for long-term growth. The challenge is learning to distinguish between temporary uncertainty and permanent damage. And that's a lesson many successful retirees eventually master. What happens if Robert sells everything? Let's return to Robert. After months of anxiety, he finally makes a decision. He sells all of his stocks. Every share, every fund, every investment tied to the market. For the first time in years, he feels calm. His account no longer swings up and down. Market headlines no longer seem relevant. When stocks fall, his balance remains unchanged. And at first, this feels wonderful. The stress is gone. The uncertainty appears smaller. The future feels more predictable. But then, something interesting happens.
A year passes, then 2, then 5. Inflation continues. Prices rise. Healthcare becomes more expensive. Insurance costs increase. Groceries cost more than they used to. Travel becomes more expensive. Daily life quietly changes.
Meanwhile, Robert's portfolio remains largely unchanged. The stability he wanted is still there. But now another problem begins to emerge. His money isn't growing very much, and over long periods of time, that matters. Because retirement is not a short-term event, it's a long-term journey. Imagine a retiree who stops working at 65 and lives until 90. That's 25 years, a quarter of a century. Over that period, the world changes dramatically. Technology changes, healthcare changes, prices change, entire economies change, and a portfolio that never grows may struggle to keep pace. This is the challenge many retirees underestimate. They focus heavily on protecting against short-term declines, but sometimes overlook the long-term consequences of insufficient growth. Robert eventually realizes something important. The goal was never to eliminate all uncertainty, because that's impossible. The goal was to manage uncertainty intelligently, and those are very different things.
The retirement portfolio is not all or nothing. One reason investment decisions feel overwhelming is that people often think in extremes. Either stocks are good or stocks are bad. Either you're aggressive or you're conservative. Either you're invested or you're not. But real life rarely works that way. Most successful retirement portfolios live somewhere in the middle. They are not built around extremes. They are built around balance. Consider a retiree who keeps some assets in stocks, some in bonds, some in cash reserves. Each part serves a purpose. Cash provides liquidity, bonds may provide stability, stocks provide long-term growth potential. Together, they create a system, and systems are often more resilient than single solutions.
This is why many experienced investors spend less time asking, should I own stocks, and more time asking, how much exposure is appropriate for my situation? Because investing is rarely an all-or-nothing decision. It's a matter of proportions. Personal circumstances, individual goals, risk tolerance, time horizon. The closer we get to retirement, the more personalized those decisions become. And that's perfectly normal. No two retirements are identical.
which means no two portfolios need to be identical either.
Why asset allocation matters more than predictions. Many investors spend enormous amounts of time trying to predict the future. Will stocks go up? Will they go down? Will there be a recession? Will inflation increase? Will interest rates fall? These questions dominate financial media, and understandably so. The future is fascinating. The future is uncertain. People naturally want answers. The problem is that accurate predictions are extremely difficult. Even professionals struggle to forecast markets consistently. And that's why many successful investors focus on something else: asset allocation. Instead of trying to predict every future event, they build portfolios designed to withstand a variety of outcomes. Think about a house. A strong house isn't built for perfect weather. It's built to withstand imperfect weather. Rain, wind, storms, unexpected conditions. Investment portfolios work similarly. The strongest retirement plans are not built around perfect predictions. They're built around resilience. Robert eventually realizes this. Instead of asking, "What will the market do next year?" he begins asking, "Can my portfolio handle different possibilities?" That shift changes everything. Because one question focuses on prediction, the other focuses on preparation. And preparation is often far more reliable. The people who stay invested calmly. One of the most fascinating things about successful long-term investors is how ordinary many of them appear. They are not constantly watching markets, they are not making dramatic predictions, they are not chasing the latest investment trend. Instead, they tend to share a few common characteristics: patience, discipline, perspective. They understand that markets fluctuate. They understand that volatility is normal. They understand that uncertainty is permanent. And because they understand these realities, they don't panic every time conditions change. This doesn't mean they ignore risk, far from it. They simply recognize that short-term discomfort is often part of long-term investing. Think about gardening. A gardener doesn't dig up seeds every week to check whether they're growing. Growth requires time, consistency, patience. Investing works much the same way. The investors who remain calm are not necessarily the smartest. Often, they're simply the most patient. And patience becomes increasingly valuable as retirement approaches. Because retirement planning is not about winning a single year, it's about sustaining decades. The people who succeed often understand that temporary declines are not the same as permanent failure, and that distinction allows them to stay focused on the bigger picture.
The question isn't stocks or no stocks. After everything we've discussed, we arrive at an important conclusion. The question was never really, should people over 50 invest in stocks? That's too simple. The real question is, how much risk is appropriate for the life I want to live? Because investing decisions don't exist in isolation. They exist within the context of a person's goals, responsibilities, resources, needs, and comfort level. A 55-year-old planning to work for another decade may have very different needs than a 75-year-old retiree. A retiree with substantial guaranteed income may make different choices than someone relying heavily on investments. Neither approach is automatically right. They're simply different. This is one of the most valuable lessons retirement teaches. Personal finance is personal, and the closer we get to retirement, the more important that truth becomes. Robert eventually decided not to eliminate stocks entirely. Instead, he adjusted his portfolio to reflect his stage of life. He reduced risk where appropriate, maintained growth where necessary, and most importantly,
built a plan he could live with emotionally. Because a perfect portfolio on paper is useless if it causes constant anxiety, and a comfortable portfolio is valuable only if it still supports long-term goals. The answer lies somewhere between fear and optimism, somewhere between caution and growth, somewhere between protecting today and preparing for tomorrow.
Growing older does not eliminate uncertainty. If anything, it reminds us how much uncertainty has always existed. Markets have always changed. Economies have always evolved. Unexpected events have always occurred. And yet, people continue building lives, raising families, saving money, planning for the future. Not because certainty exists, but because progress remains possible despite uncertainty. Perhaps that's one of the greatest lessons investing can teach us. Not how to predict the future, but how to move forward without needing to predict it perfectly. The goal is not avoiding every risk. That's impossible. The goal is understanding which risks are worth taking, which risks support the life you're trying to build, which risks deserve respect, and which fears deserve less power over your decisions. As we grow older, wisdom often replaces certainty. We learn that life rarely follows perfect plans. But thoughtful preparation still matters. Patience still matters. Adaptability still matters. And confidence matters too. Not confidence that everything will go exactly as expected, but confidence that we can adapt when it doesn't. Because retirement isn't about finding a perfect investment strategy. It's about creating a life that feels sustainable, meaningful, and free. A life where money supports your priorities rather than controls them. A life where growth and caution coexists. A life where decisions are guided by purpose instead of fear. Thank you for spending this time with me. And if these conversations help you think more calmly about money and retirement, I hope you'll join me again. Quiet wealth is built slowly and lived fully.
Quiet wealth, calm finance, better life.